Yeah, so this is going to be very similar to
Is it not working? Okay, hang on 1 second. Give it a try again. No? Must be out of range. Okay, I'll click for you.
so the results we have here, before we get to something maybe more controversial here, I guess now. This is similar to what I had last year, and this is in the report. And just the only point I want to make is, we've talked about this before, that the year you treat, you get pressed Eurasian Watermilfoil around the lake, and then the following year it comes back. So if we look at 2017, you treated, and species richness, or the number of species that are in the lake, has not changed over time appreciably anywhere. We had 33 this year, 33 last year, and 35, 37. So that's not changing, so that's a good thing. You're keeping diversity in the lake, and that's good. If we look at this first one, the 93% versus 55, in the year of after you treated in 2017, in the fall, you had a percent. This is the percentage of milfoil that's present in the 304 sampling points we look at. So in 2017, after you treated, we had 55% of those 304 points had presence of Eurasian Watermilfoil. In 2018, that goes back to almost all of them, 93%. So that's the interesting thing here, that these numbers here, as Jimmy has inferred and so forth, it appears when we got on the lake, the first observation was, wow, this looks pretty good. Obviously, a lot of Eurasian Watermilfoil was flowering in several places, but we could quickly tell the density was not there. Now, this was maybe a down year for a lot of plants in New York State. A lot of lakes had a down year. Chautauqua Lake, for example, was 3 weeks behind. We went there and there's nothing happening. And so they finally caught up in July, which other lakes didn't. We weren't on this lake, so we don't really know, but other lakes we looked at, they were substantially behind in growth this year, most likely due to the crazy spring we had. But that's up for speculation. So we got here and we clearly saw right away, and my crew that's been here many times before noticed that the density was not there. You had milfoil coming up and flowering all over the place, but if you look at this one, which is the percentage of medium and dense plots that were there, we're at 23% of the 304 plots were medium or dense, and that means there's lots of milfoil there. There's lots of milfoil. So this year we had 23%. If you go back to 2016, which was 2 years after you treated in 14, we had 54%, and a year after treatment in 2015, which you didn't treat, you had 32. So it appears that our observations and our measurements bore out what we noticed visually. Now, looking at the tracking lines of the harvester, obviously the harvester went through and most likely influenced the Eurasian Watermilfoil that we were measuring just after Labor Day. And again, the same thing here. This is a percentage of medium and dense abundances of all the locations that had milfoil. And again, similar kind of thing, 25% this year versus 56 and 34 the other years that were after. And again, with the year of treatment, you're down to extremely low numbers, 3%. Places had a medium or dense. And this is just a quick thing. This is 2017 year of treatment, and the only thing I want you to notice here is the density of the colors. When you have a white or clear color, there's not the presence of Eurasian Watermilfoil is not there. Or if it's pink, which is sort of similar kind of thing. But if you have a yellow, that means it's sparse in our measurements, and so that means it's there. So And when you have these darker colors, medium density is a lot of milfoil. And so if you look at the year of treatment, obviously there's not much happening there. Interestingly, this area up here in 2017 appears to really have gotten clobbered. And sometimes that's not treated. In other years that wasn't an area that was treated, but that was. In 2018 that came back pretty dense and had more than we've seen there in the past. But generally overall, not as dense as other years is what kind of we're on. And then just to remind you, this is the treatment plan off the town website that was done in 2017, and the pink areas were the areas that were where renovate was applied. And again, this is the results that year. You can see obviously where this is an area they treated up in here, which sometimes is not normally treated that heavily, but they're really it's very obvious in the year of treatment. And then this, I'm just throwing this out. This is the number of occurrences, and I did this every year, and some people don't like to deal with this, and but the point here I want to make is this is the number of occurrences of Eurasian watermilfoil when you look at all the species that are there. And you could argue whether it's useful or not, but it turns out when we're looking at this lake and Juanita-La-Mocha lakes, we are beginning to see some interesting things happen. But if you look at 2017 here, the year of treatment, we had 166 occurrences of watermilfoil out of all the species we found. So it was depressed. It was 6% of this total wheel was Eurasian watermilfoil. In the year 2018, where there was no treatment, again we went from 166 occurrences to 282 occurrences of watermilfoil out of all the species we found. We're just looking at species. We're not looking at locations or anything like that. And then again, that's 10%. So it's been bouncing back and forth, and so we see it going from year of treatment in this lake, Juanita-La-Mocha, we get down to 6% milfoil, and we come back to 10 to 12% occurrences of all the species that are in the lake the year that you don't treat. Now, this may get to something a little more controversial because there seems to be a misunderstanding here. This is the locations that Jimmy mentioned. We did a study on weevils, and what I did was look at this far corner down here where there's been a fair amount of milfoil. In the past, there's not a lot of houses, so they can kind of leave the Eurasian watermilfoil there. And I also looked up here in this area right here, close to the, as you make the bend there, and sampled those two areas. And I'm sampling Eurasian watermilfoil tips randomly. I've been doing this a long time on a lot of lakes. Still doing it on several lakes, Chautauqua mainly, but also doing it at Lake Bonaparte, where we have done experiments with augmenting weevils. And Lake Bonaparte is also where a company, EnviroScience, which is not now in the weevil business anymore, which is a good thing, they, at that point, over many years, were adding weevil eggs. And I'll get the point here in a minute. Weevil eggs, and they mainly sold them to everybody at $1 an egg. And that was sort of realistically, when I look back at it and what I thought then as a scam, we ended up doing an experiment before they left of actually putting in adult weevils. And we were able to show directly, they put in 10,000 eggs, we put in 10,000 adult weevils, and we had a significant jump in insects in that year and maybe the following year. It turns out Lake Bonaparte had weevils anyway, and we showed that from the beginning. When they first came there, we showed that if they went away from where they added them, they hid it. So the thing I do before I go in, I did not add any weevils to Cazenovia Lake. Now, there may be a misunderstanding here. The proposal I gave was just to come and sample and go back and do the microscope work. If I had suggested using weevils, the cost would have been many times later because someone has to raise the weevils, collect the weevils, or something. If you're spending $1 an egg, if this company was getting $1 an egg, an adult, which I would only put in adults, would be many, many times higher. So the thing I would do, and I'll get to where it's been successful, is I was checking here, sampling at the peak time when we had possibility of weevils being in their life cycle and being high. I was coming here to look to see if there's any potential long-term for insect herbivores, invertebrates, to do something to the Eurasian Watermilfoil. And I'll compare this to Chautauqua Lake where they're really hammering the Eurasian Watermilfoil. So here, I was collecting these things. We do the microscope work, which is fairly expensive because you're looking at each individual stem and you're dissecting it and finding all the life stages of the insect herbivores if they're there. And as Jimmy mentioned, we didn't find much. That report is coming within a week. But it turns out, we want to look at these two locations, this one and this one. And so at the south end, this is what we looked at in the spring on 6/14. We did our sampling. We go out and we sampled 25 random tips of the top of Eurasian Watermilfoil. And it turns out at the north end, we did find 7 weevils on 25 tips, and that translates to 0.28 weevils per able skim. That's not very many. It's not quite enough. It is something, so that was kind of a surprise. At the south end, we only found 1 weevil on 25 tips, so that's sort of a non-starter. So what we're looking at is if there's something going on that's holding back these insects from taking off in this lake, and in many other lakes we look at. So if it's at 1, there's something going on, and it would be probably fruitless for us to go and put in weevils and expect that they're going to take off. We have lots of insects, lots of invertebrates on the plants, well maybe that's it. So what I'm doing is trying to figure out, with this study that we did this year, if there's any potential for this. So that's the 7 and 1, and then the next you can go is the 28. That's a density. And so then let's go to the next one, which is, this is at Chautauqua Lake. And at Chautauqua Lake, I'm looking at a lot of locations. And Chautauqua Lake is probably the best story we have. We did not add any weevils to Chautauqua Lake. Chautauqua Lake, they asked me to come out in 2002 to look at it because a company was trying to sell them $100,000 plus worth of weevils. And I said, well, maybe somebody ought to look. So I get there in 2002 and the lake is loaded with trillions of weevils. So they're really dense. And so in Chautauqua Lake, at these different places, and this is about the same time, this is June 21st versus your June 14th. So we're up to 31 weevils in this case at this location per 25, and 38 here. Here's a down one, and some high. So this turns out, next slide, that you're coming up to 1.24 or 1.5. If you get up to 0.75 or 3/4 of a weevil or even 0.5, then you have a lot happening because that weevil, we're looking at life stages, either eggs, larvae, or adults. They're going to possibly do something. In Chautauqua Lake, except for one location this year, they don't see any flowering. In the past, we haven't seen flowering normally because the insects, not only the weevil, but moth, caddis, and everything, hammer and destroy the tip. So that's what I was looking for here, and I didn't see a lot of that here. Here we had nice flowering tips. And it's most likely because of the fish population. Lots of bluegills in the lake. I have a friend that fishes here from Chittenango, and he fishes mainly for bluegills because they're really loaded. So bluegills really, in many cases, like Bonaparte, for example, even though it appears the weevil appears to work there, they have large populations of bluegills, which is holding that back. So I didn't put any weevils in the lake this year. I want that understood. The cost of my proposal was just to come and sample, and I went back and looked at that because I heard from somebody up here earlier in the summer that I put weevils in the lake, so I don't think so. But we were mainly looking at the potential, and the idea is you might be able to change it if you had more predators. You have predators in the lake, but the predators you need maybe more walleye or more pike or something. Chautauqua Lake seems to have the right fish combination, and they don't have many bluegills at all, or many panfish, in fact, except they get a lot of white perch, but they don't seem to make a difference. So just in finishing up, we also screened the lake. Everybody mentioned hydrilla. We obviously, if we're here and we're looking specifically at locations around the lake, we're looking for hydrilla too, or anything invasive. And obviously, we don't expect to ever have hydrilla here until someone brings it in, and if you're monitoring things coming in, that's hopefully will deter that. We did continue to observe the European frogbit of the first speaker. Again, they're doing a much more complete survey because they're in canoes. They're going around, going shallow. We're throwing rakes on specific points that were picked by Allied Biological, which is Solitude now, in 2008. So we go to those specific points. They're not particularly near the shore where there is, but we have in the last several years always found frogbit at location 1 and 2, and we did this year. And again, we had an average of 9.1 species per location compared to 9.3 last year, so that's great, that's staying there. And again, the depth of the lake was not any different than other years. And as I mentioned earlier, we observed fewer locations with medium and dense Eurasian Watermilfoil this year, whether that's due to conditions of climate or whether it's due to the harvesting. For some reason, when we got here, we quickly noticed that it was not as dense as it has been in other off years. So that's the last of my thought.
Any questions for Bob?
Can you talk a little bit about the caddisfly findings in Chautauqua, and have you seen any here?
Yeah, so interestingly, in Chautauqua Lake, and again this year, this fall, we found a lot of caddisfly. So we have 5 herbivores attacking Eurasian Watermilfoil in Chautauqua Lake this year. We have 2 caddis, one ghost caddis, which is about this big, which is our main caddis. It's a generalist, so it kind of eats everything out in the fall. But it really hits milfoil. We have another caddis this year, a little tiny one, that actually defoliated milfoil in several large areas of the lake down to nothing. I mean, it just stripped it. We're looking at the moth there and the herbivore. So the caddis we did not observe in any numbers of caddis. We observed a few caddis here, but when we're taking out the plants, we throw them into a tray and sort those. If we have caddis crawling all over, we quickly note that, and we can see that in Chautauqua in almost every sample this fall. So here we did not see that. We did not see a lot of caddis in there. So those are things we're looking for when we do the survey or observing.
Thank you, Bob.